reading notebook, you're taking reading notes. And it's going to be labeled and dated today's date. And the next thing you're going to label is how to annotate. That's what the title of this lesson is, this mini lesson. How to annotate. Okay, we're going to learn how to annotate our reading text. How many of you guys already do annotate or have learned how to annotate in 7th grade when you're reading a book? Good, so that's most of the class. This will be review for you. For others who haven't learned that yet, this is going to be pretty easy, pretty straightforward. You're going to use sticky notes in my class. Why annotate? Why do we annotate? What are some reasons?
To be more organized.
To be more organized? Can you explain that? Like, what do you mean by that?
When you find something in what you're reading, you can organize it with other similar things.
Sure. What else? Why else would we annotate? What are some reasons that you annotate? What do you guys annotate for? You said most of you guys learned how to do it in 7th grade. What are some of the reasons you do it? What?
Like if you have to write about the book later on, you know where to find stuff and when it's happening.
Right.
What you thought back then.
Yeah, to remember what you were thinking when you have to write about it later. We call that writing short with the annotation, and then writing long when you sit down and actually write about it. So when you can take your notes when you wrote short to write long later. Great, awesome. What else do you do? I want one more person to tell me why it's important to annotate. Drew.
To help us understand the text better.
Help understand the text better. How do you mean?
Like, you know what they're talking about more by making comparisons to yourself.
Okay, good. To help you understand more in depth what's going on in the text. And I wrote some reasons up here with one of my classes. Helps us remember. That's why we annotate. Helps us remember things. Like we said, we can go back and look more in depth at things, like we said there. If you're confused about something, you can write a question and maybe it'll get answered later. Or you can write long about what is the confusing part that the author has in the book. We mimic what an author does in our own writing. Like I said, Robert Hayden, that poem where he was crackling and making the crackling sounds with his alliteration. I thought that was neat. Maybe I want to try that in my own writing. So I annotate what he was doing in that poem to try to mimic it. Make connections with other texts or real life. Like make connections to a Harry Potter book from another book that you read. This is just like Harry Potter, how he does this. Or real life. This is just like what's going on in Benghazi or wherever else. You might make that connection. So there are a lot of different reasons why we annotate. Those are just a few, but you can probably come up with some other ones. What to annotate? So we're going to read a couple pages in this novel, When the Emperor Was Divine. We're just going to read, this is the very first page, the first chapter of When the Emperor Was Divine. I'm going to read it and stop and tell you what I annotated. The sign had appeared overnight on billboards and trees and the backs of the bus stop benches. You hear all those B's first right off? The billboards, backs of the bus stop benches. So there's a little note here, alliteration. There were a lot of B's there. That's something that I noticed, so that's something that is annotated here. It hung in the window of Woolworth's. It hung by the entrance to the YMCA. It was stapled to the door of the municipal court and nailed at eye level to every telephone pole along University Avenue. The woman was returning a book to the library when she saw the sign in the post office window. It was a sunny day in Berkeley in the spring of 1942, and she was wearing new glasses and could see everything clearly for the first time in weeks. She no longer had to squint, but she squinted out of habit anyway. She read the sign from top to bottom, and then, still squinting, she took out a pen and read the sign from top to bottom again. The print was small and dark. Some of it was tiny. She wrote down a few words on the back of the bank receipt, then turned around and went home and began to pack. So another question I have. Who is the woman? Is she the main character? Is she the protagonist? They don't even tell us who she is, what her name is. Who is she? So I'm interested in knowing about that. I put a sticky note here. It's a question that I have. Just real quick, I jot it down, put a sticky note, and then go on to the next thing. When the overdue notice from the library arrived in the mail 9 days later, she still had not finished packing. The children had just left for school and boxes and suitcases were scattered across the floor of the house. She tossed the envelope into the nearest suitcase and walked out the door. Outside, the sun was warm and the palm fronds were clacking idly against the side of the house. She pulled on her white silk gloves and began to walk east on Ashby. She crossed California Street and bought several bars of Lux soap and a large jar of face cream at the Rumford Pharmacy. She passed the thrift shop and the boarded up grocery but saw no one she knew on the sidewalk. At the newsstand on the corner of Grove, she bought a copy of the Berkeley Gazette. She scanned the headlines quickly. The Burma Road had been severed, and one of the Dione quintuplets, Yvonne, was still recovering from an ear operation. Sugar rationing would begin on Tuesday. She folded the paper in half, but was careful not to let the ink darken her gloves. At Lundy's Hardware, she stopped and looked at the display of Victory Garden shovels in the window. They were well-made shovels with sturdy metal handles, and she thought for a moment of buying one. The price was right, and she did not like to pass up a bargain. Then she remembered that she had already had a shovel at home in the shed. In fact, she had two. She did not need a third. I'm going to stop here. The tone, one of the things I noticed about the tone, the way the author wrote the story, the words that they're using, the word choice. We talk about tone of your poem. The word choice, it's just matter of fact. It's not, there's no real emotion behind it. It's just describing this thing happened and this thing happened and this thing happened. It's not very fiery, it's not sad, it's not somber, nothing. It's just kind of even keel, matter of fact. Another thing that I noticed is I made a text to History Connect. See this T/H? You can make little notes to yourself that only you know what they mean, like abbreviations and things like that. That's what that TH is. So I understand what TH means. You might have things that text to history, you might have things that only you understand, and that's fine too. But the text to History Connect is rationing during the war. Did you guys learn about rationing last year?
Yeah.
What is rationing? Somebody just spit it out, what rationing is. Give it a simple definition. What? Go ahead.
Limits being put on the amount of food and other supplies you can buy.
Yeah, limits on the amount of food and other supplies you can buy. So she's rationed, her sugar is rationed out. And when in the United States did they ration that kind of stuff out?
World War II.
Go ahead.
World War II.
World War II, yeah. So we know, they also said it was 1942 at the beginning of the story, but we know that there's a rationing going on. It's the middle of World War II. Let me continue on. I'm going to do this, and then we'll learn how to do this by ourselves. Nice glasses, Joe Lundy said the moment she walked through the door. You think? She asked. I'm not used to them yet. She picked up a hammer and gripped the handle firmly. Do you have anything bigger? She asked. Joe Lundy said that what she had in her hand was the biggest hammer he had. She put the hammer back on the rack. How's your roof holding out? He asked her. I think the shingles are rotting. It just sprung another leak. It's been a wet year. The woman nodded. Well, we've had some nice days. She walked past the Venetian blinds and the blackout shades in the back of the store. She picked out 2 rolls of tape and a ball of twine and brought them back to the register. Every time it rains, I have to set out another bucket, she said. She put down 2 quarters on the counter. Nothing wrong with the bucket, said Joe Lundy. He pushed the quarters back toward her across the counter, but he did not look at her. You can pay me later, he said. Then he began to wipe the side of the register with a rag. There was a dark stain there that would not go away. I can pay you now, said the woman. All right, I'm going to stop there real quick. So I noticed another thing here. There was another song. He did not look at her. So is he ashamed of something? I noticed that he didn't look at her. Is he ashamed of something? That's what a question that I had. Why the conversation about money? It seems tense. She tried to pay him with quarters, and then he said, no, you can pay me later, or whatever. And she said, I can pay you now. That whole exchange seems kind of weird and tense. So it's something that I noticed, questioning why that conversation about money. Put the sticky notes there. Any questions about how to annotate or what you should be annotating? Just anything that is interesting to you, anything you're confused about, anything that you're questioning. you can annotate. Anything that you find cool, an effect that you find cool, the opposite, annotate. So you try it. Go back through a section of your independent book that you read and reread the page and make at least one annotation.